Well, my friends, we finally have something that I've been looking forward to for quite some time now. We've driven a number of GM's full-size SUVs along with their pickup trucks over the years, but I always wanted to get into a long wheelbase version of it, and we finally do. This is a 2021 Chevrolet Suburban Premier. This is the second from the top. This 2021 is a new generation. It's been out for a while now, but the top end would be the High Country, which we actually just featured a little while ago with the Silverado 2500 HD. So that goes way at the top, more of the premium, kind of near luxury type of interior. But with the Premier, we get pretty much all the stuff that you really need out of a vehicle. Now, the MSRPs were below. We have quite a few options on this vehicle. $79,000 Canadian base. That's about $68,000 in the US. And as tested, close to $100,000 Canadian, or about $75,000 in the US. Pretty well equipped for this. We also have things like the rear entertainment system on this. So number of features and options on there that maybe you don't necessarily need, like $2,000 for the rims or the $1,195 for the iridescent pearl tri-coat paint. But regardless, this car is meant to impress, because GM set out to improve their iconic full-size SUV by offering more space. The short wheelbase Tahoe got a 66% improvement for cargo space behind the third row. That's pretty incredible for the trunk space back there. And 19% more cargo behind the first row here in the Suburban. So the Tahoe gets the biggest interior improvements for space and size, but this also sees some pretty serious improvements as well. Our truck comes with the 3-liter Duramax turbo diesel inline 6 engine. It's something that we talked about back when we did the GMC Yukon and the Cadillac Escalade. A couple people asked if we were going to be getting the diesels here in Canada, and the answer is yes, as we do have it here. And with this, we do have some pretty impressive numbers: 277 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque with a 10-speed automatic transmission, and we can tow up to 7,800 pounds or 3,558 kilograms. Pretty impressive numbers for this. And GM puts all that information on a sticker in the driver's side door jamb, which is something that we don't usually find. So if you want to know about the payload or the towing or any of the things like that for the newest generation of GM's vehicles, you're going to find it there. It's really handy and good to have. Now, it's one thing to have a nice engine like this. It's great on the highways and pretty good for fuel economy overall, but you also want to have a really good ride. And that's something that the Suburban has always been known for. This generation has magnetic ride control. And if you go with the top end High Country, you have the option to add on the Max trailering package, which would add the air adaptive suspension that we talked about when we drove the Escalade before. So this one's just got the normal magnetic ride control, and it's great on the road. I mean, it's a long wheelbase SUV. It eats up the bumps, no problem. But for the most part, the exterior styling is pretty much in line with what we see with the current generation Silverado 1500. Front end grille is pretty similar. If you go with the High Country, you're going to get that unique copper accent on the inside. You have LED daytime running lights and headlights. There's no fog lights on this, and out back we still have a couple of incandescent bulbs for things like the turn signals and brake lights, as well as the reverse lights. You know, for me, if you're paying about $100,000 Canadian, you kind of like it all to be LED, but whatever. I mean, this is kind of what you're getting for when you go with a full-size vehicle, because there aren't a lot of options here in North America. If you want a full-size truck-based SUV, especially with the extra cargo room in the back, it's pretty much this, the Ford Expedition Max, and once Jeep comes out with the Grand Wagoneer, we'll have a third option. But I'd say the exterior styling is good on this. I personally prefer the long wheelbase version that comes with the Suburban. I think, especially with the most recent generation of GM vehicles, because they're so tall, they're so wide, they're so big, the fact that they're short, if you go with the short wheelbase versions, they just kind of look a little bit like Tonka trucks on the road. But because this is so much longer, I feel that it looks a lot better. The proportions are better on the longer vehicles. So for me, I don't need the space, but this is the one that I would go with. And I'm really happy to have the chance to drive the Suburban, because it's something I've always wanted to do. This is an icon. The Suburban is the longest continuously produced nameplate with 85 years of production. That is generations of people that could have driven the Suburbans over the course of time. But not only that, the Suburban has appeared in at least one television series every single year since 1956, and at least one film every single year since 1960. And it has appeared in over 30 award-nominated films, and it is the first vehicle ever to be awarded the Hollywood's Award of Excellent Star by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. This vehicle has a Hollywood star, and that's why it is so widely used. It is so iconic when it comes to movies, television, cinema, because these are used as police cars, motorcade vehicles. The bad guys use them, the good guys use them. Everybody uses a Suburban when it's time to get down to business. And I can see why. I mean, this thing is just a beast on the road. I can think of so many different movies that have Suburbans featured in them, and it will continue on as GM continues to produce these vehicles and offer them in so many different configurations, because the limits are pretty much endless when it comes to this. So let me know in the comments below what your favorite movie is and favorite scene is that involves a Suburban or any of the full-size GM pickup truck-based SUVs. But back to this specific Suburban, yes, the exterior has undergone a facelift. The easiest way really to tell that this is the new generation out back, the industry adopted nameplate going across the back of the trunk has been brought onto this vehicle. It says Suburban along the back as well as on the sides of the vehicle, but that's always kind of been there. So now along the middle of the back of the trunk, you do see the Suburban nameplate. And like with the previous generations, you do have a power lift gate as well as a separate piece of glass that you can open up, giving you much better access to the rear of this vehicle. But what about the interior? If you're going to be buying the Suburban, you're going to be spending a whole lot of time on the inside of this SUV. Now, GM could have easily just taken the interior off the Silverado and called it a day, but GM decided to go with an SUV-specific interior, something completely different from what you have on the Silverado, and it does feel that way, and I personally do like that. That was one of the complaints that I had about the Silverado. It's just too similar to the previous generation, whereas the inside on this is quite a bit nicer. We have full leather interior, heated and ventilated front seats with driver memory, a heated steering wheel, and the second row has heat as well with tri-zone climate. And that's unfortunately where I think the Americans still fall flat, is the second row amenities. Something like the Kia Telluride or Hyundai Palisade, which are mid-size crossovers, offer ventilated rear seats, and this thing costs $100,000 and it doesn't have that feature. One thing that they have done with the second row is now the second row slides forward and back, so you can have more legroom in the third row if you need it, less in the second, to have a little bit more customization for passenger comfort. But GM says that they've improved the interior space, especially on the Suburban. Third row legroom is up to give you a little bit better room back there. If you have full-size adults like myself back there, you should have a much better experience in this generation than you did with the previous one. But for the most part, the interior really works. We have sort of a smaller infotainment screen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We have a beautiful color head-up display and a digital gauge cluster, as well as the two infotainment systems in the back. We saw that pretty much same system on the Cadillac Escalade, so if you've got passengers back there, if you're using this more as a livery vehicle, you know, maybe it's Uber or some sort of limousine service, the people back there will be pretty content with the tech. One other feature that we have on the inside that wasn't on any of the other full-size GM vehicles we've driven is a power adjustable center console. Controls are in the roof. You can slide the console forward or back, giving you extra storage space or even hidden storage space if you want to put some valuables there and not necessarily have them seen as somebody walks by your car. Controls are pretty easy to use. You can slide it forward or back, and you can extend the armrest out. So if you put it all the way back so that the rear seat passengers have easier access to their cup holders, you still have an armrest. So some pretty cool stuff there. There's hidden and extra storage compartments throughout the vehicle, including the typical glove box, but there's also a small compartment just beside the infotainment system that you can put things like your sunglasses. That's about it for the exterior and interior when it comes to the 2021 Chevrolet Suburban. I think we need to take this on the road, see how the Duramax diesel performs, and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for a $100,000 full-size SUV. Now look, I personally am very happy to be driving this car today because we've driven the Escalade several times. We've had a couple different model years, and we had the previous generation as well as the new one, and now we are driving a full-size long wheelbase version of GM's big ass SUV, and it's a different version because we've also driven the GMC Yukon, and honestly the difference between the Yukon and this, it's pretty small compared to the Escalade. Big difference. But this feels a lot more like the previous generation Escalade, which is good. Obviously you want the top end luxury trim to trickle down to the rest of the lineup, so that's what I like to see. But I'm also excited because of the diesel. 3-liter Duramax inline 6 turbo diesel produces pretty decent power numbers, but the important factor is the fuel economy. How did the Suburban do on our test loop. It completed our 100-kilometer test loop in 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers. That is seriously good. When you consider how big this SUV is, really good. Now, unfortunately, the only other full-size SUV we've driven was the Lincoln Navigator, and that was before we started our test loop. I know we did do the previous generation, the, what was it, 2014 Ford Expedition, but that was an old vehicle, it wasn't new, and we also didn't do test loop. So the only numbers that we have are really to compare to something like the Yukon Denali that we featured in the winter. That used the big V8 engine available for this, the 6.2 liter V8. That did our 100-kilometer test loop in 12.2 liters per 100 kilometers. Then I believe when we did the Escalade, it was 12.3. So it was about 0.1 difference between them, which kind of makes sense. The Escalade's a little bit heavier because it has more tech, so obviously it wouldn't do quite as well. But I mean, these are seriously good numbers. Almost 4 full liters per 100 kilometers better. Now, to be fair, the way that we have our 100-kilometer test loop set up is it is very heavy on highway driving. You know, regardless of whether we're doing 100% highway or 50-50, you know, when we compare it to the other vehicles we've tested, which is every single car we drive on our test loop, that's how they all add up. So yes, these are great numbers on the highway, but even as we're doing around town stuff, yeah, I haven't, again, driven as much as I would like to because of the lockdowns, and you know, I know everything's kind of opened up here in Quebec, but I still don't do anything. I'm usually just at home. I've done just about 250 kilometers on this as of filming it, and I'm still only at 12 liters per 100 kilometers. So even with a bunch of in-town stuff, leaving this thing idling for an hour while I film the outside and inside, it still is more fuel efficient than the gas V8 from GM. So holy cow, man, this diesel, that's the way to go. Plus, here in Quebec, I don't know about your market, but diesel right now is about 10 cents cheaper per liter than it is for regular fuel. So lots of pluses, a lot of reasons why you're going to want to go with this. And I do believe that, and I could be wrong, I do forget, it's been a little while, I think you need premium fuel if you're going with the big V8 engine, the 6.2 liter. I think that's what it needed on the Escalade. I could be wrong though. I know for sure the Lincoln Navigator does not need premium, but even if you don't use premium, you're still saving money. So fuel economy on this has been great. The ride on this is super good. It's so smooth on the road. It just eats up the bumps, even though this doesn't have the full air ride suspension. This is just the regular magnetic ride control. You'd have to go with the Max trailering package available. I believe it's only on currently the High Country and the Z71. So you go with the Max trailer and you're going to get that, but honestly, I mean, you don't need it. This thing drives so well. Performance is good. It's what you would want out of a big SUV. And that's a great thing about going with the long wheelbase. You've got 3 rows of seating. You can fit 7 people very comfortably in here, and you still have tons of space in the trunk for all of your cargo. And it's always been the concern, the complaint that I have when going with the full-size vehicles is if you're using the 3rd row, you have no trunk space. But it's a good thing that these are on the market because you've got a lot more trunk space with it. It's hard not to like this vehicle. I mean, I really do like it. I think the styling is really good. The interior here, I like the layout, even though it's not over the top, but we do have a lot of soft touch materials mixed in with some plastic. Left of the driver's steering here looks like the rest of the trim, but it is a very hard plastic. So it's kind of mixed in, but yeah, it's kind of what you're getting for when you're buying the Chevrolet version of this vehicle. It's still expensive, and I still think that the Koreans offer better 2nd row seat amenities, having ventilated seats back there. And as we saw with something like the Kia Carnival with power options, I mean, those are things that you really should have. And I get it, you're not necessarily going to get it on the Suburban, but it should have been on the Escalade. So the things that we liked about the Escalade don't really apply here because this doesn't have as much tech, which is fine, but it still works very well. Wireless Apple CarPlay, ventilated and heated front seats, all the tech is there. Everything that I would need out of a vehicle is here. The cameras are good, so it works out pretty well, but that's my complaint. 2nd row seats are kind of lacking. 3rd row seats, there's nothing back there. So something like the BMW X7, they've got at least heated seats back there, plus a 5th zone climate control, whereas here we just have 3 zone. You can turn it on and off from up here, but that's about it. So if the Americans want to get serious, and I'm talking like serious about these big vehicles, they should start to offer those features. Yeah, I get it. this is made in Texas. This sells like crazy in Texas. You don't need heated seats in Texas, but ventilated seats, I'm sure that the people down there would absolutely appreciate having a second row set of ventilated seats. So stuff like that could be added onto it. But I gotta tell you, if I were to buy this, which I would definitely be in the market for it if I needed all of this space, if I needed an actual condominium on wheels, I would totally get the long wheelbase Suburban, and I would get it with the diesel. I have been so impressed with the diesel on this. It's definitely the one to go for. If you're going for fuel economy, it makes sense. If you're going for overall cost, it makes sense. Now, the difference in price, yes, it's going to be a little bit more to go up to it, but I think you'll be saving it a little bit more than you would if you were to get something like the hybrid version on the older models, or even when we talked about the Ford Explorer hybrid. It was really tough to make that number work, to pay for the upfront cost and then see the fuel savings. But the fact is, you're saving about 10 cents per liter as of filming this per fill up that you're doing. Plus the fuel economy is so much more improved on this that you will be saving money in the long run and a lot faster. So I would definitely go for the diesel. I like this interior. I like everything about this Premier trim. I don't think I would go up to the High Country personally myself. I do like this. So there really isn't much to complain about. Good job, GM. And I think it might be the first time that I would take the Chevrolet version over the GMC Yukon. I like the Yukon. Don't get me wrong, I love the look of the current generation GMC truck, but there is something iconic about the Suburban. I think it's just so cool, the amount of movies and TV shows that these vehicles have been in and will continue to be in. As I mentioned on my walk around outside, if there's a favorite scene or something that you'd like to share from a movie or TV show that involves one of GM's big trucks, definitely let me know. But I mean, they have been used so often in every sort of production that it's crazy. Get a couple of these, it's gonna be fun. You have a whole bunch of black ones, you can have yourself your own little presidential motorcade, and there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But if you have any questions about this episode or about this vehicle, please let me know in the comments below. I do try to get back to everybody in a timely fashion, so leave a comment below, give a thumbs up if you liked this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Until next time, thanks for watching, and take care.